2005, Tom Griffin traveled there with other American veterans and his son John.
The bus would go through towns and they would read what was going on with the big banner and they would start applauding. So yeah, we were toast of the town wherever we went. They just really turned out and forced me. Couldn't get enough of those old guys. So just tremendous. Just tremendous.
Jeff Thatcher is president of a nonprofit group called Children of the Doolittle Raiders.
Actually, China was not on my radar, but in July of 2015, I received a letter from the Chinese ambassador to the United States inviting me and my father to come over to China for the 70th anniversary of the end of World War II celebration that they were planning in early September of that year.
David Thatcher, because of his poor health, couldn't travel to China. But thanks to Melinda Liu, who for many years was the Beijing bureau chief of Newsweek magazine, Jeff Thatcher was able to visit the beach where his father saved the lives of the other crew members of the ruptured duck.
Well, I'm out on the beach and standing there, and I suddenly had an epiphany. A wave of emotion just washed over me. I suddenly became aware of what my dad had to deal with, a plane crash landing, him being a stranger in a strange land, unable to communicate with these people. And it was a really touching moment for me.
He even met a woman who was using a piece of his father's aircraft as a cane.
2018年10月25号，为了纪念杜立特突袭行动，那么浙江省徐州市呢，他建了一个杜立特行动纪念馆，然后纪念馆正式建成，然后搞一个开馆仪式，他们邀请了美国的杜立特突袭者子女协会，他一共有25个成员，到了中国来，邀请他们过来参加这个开馆仪式。
In the years after World War II, the United States and Japan, once bitter enemies, became trusted allies. By 2018, relations between the United States and China were at an especially low ebb. International trade was a continuing irritant, just as it had been for years. But now, there were strategic issues as well. American and Chinese military units often stalk each other in disputed areas of the South China Sea. What kind of reception might a group of visiting Americans encounter in China? It turned out they were very welcome. Volunteer historians researching the story of the Doolittle Raiders in Jiangxi province were anxious to meet them.
我们主要就是想，就是从上老营救的4号机、5号机、13号机、14号机。如果有飞行员的子女来了，我们可以跟他建立联系，所以我就主动的就是跟他们这个成员交流，最后我们找来找去，最后我找到了就是在上饶广东着陆的14号机的这个飞行员。
As I joined up with the CDR group and the children's group at Chuzhou, a delegation from Shangrao came that I had not met when I was there, and that was Professor Lowe and his group, and I've maintained contact with him, and he's done tremendous research finding who these people were in the various pictures and family members, and we're still doing that. We're still in the process of trying to find more information.
Multiple museums and memorials dedicated to the Doolittle Raiders can be found in East China, including the restored medical clinic where the crew of the ruptured duck were treated.
I met the son of the man who had saved my father, the eldest son. Everything goes to the eldest son over in China. I met his brothers, his children.
Still, what impact did the Doolittle raid really have? The damage caused was minimal. There were unintentional civilian deaths as well. Yet it's undeniable that Japanese pilots and aircraft who might have battled U.S. or Chinese forces were instead held back to defend Tokyo. The largest impact was on the June 1942 battle for a mid-Pacific island called Midway.
It's important to look, though, at the lead up to the Battle of Midway, because Admiral Yamamoto, who was the architect of the attack on Pearl Harbor, really felt that the strike on Hawaii had not been successful because America's aircraft carriers weren't there that Sunday morning. And so he had pitched an idea to lure those aircraft carriers back into battle so that he could finish the job that his forces had failed to do on December 7th. And Midway was his idea. Midway at the time was a desolate, windswept coral atoll about 1,200 miles from Hawaii, but it functioned as an important submarine and air base for the Americans. It was essentially a priceless piece of Pacific real estate. And he knew that if he attacked Midway, America would have no choice but to bring those aircraft carriers back into battle, and he could crush them and do the job that he had meant to do at Pearl Harbor.
The American pilots who sank 4 Japanese aircraft carriers during the Battle of Midway fundamentally changed the Pacific War. Those pilots, like the Doolittle Raiders, didn't consider themselves heroes. The same is true for the unlikely group of Chinese men and women who rescued many of the raiders.
And some of the other Chinese were, literally fishermen, farmers, part bandits. They were totally not the people that you would expect to be able to get along with any kind of foreigner. Some of them didn't even know what nationality these white guys were. They thought, are they Japanese? And they've never seen anybody like that before. So, and yet, despite all those challenges and all those cultural differences, they found a way to communicate, they found a way to move together, they found a way to escape, and they found a way to help each other.
The bonds forged by the children of the Doolittle Raiders had an unanticipated humanitarian impact in 2020.
In February of 2020, when the pandemic was raging in China, the children of the Doolittle Raiders were contacted by our friends in the Chuzhou municipal government, and they were desperate for personal protective equipment, PPE.
CDR sent surgical masks, goggles, and gowns, along with $6,000 to their friends in China.
And then in April of 2020, I received a letter from the Chuzhou municipal government. Prior to that, they had sent me a heartfelt letter of thanks, thanking the CDR for our efforts to get them their PPE. Well, they wrote me a letter back in April and said, hey, we understand the pandemic's raging in the U.S. We would like to reciprocate your earlier gesture of goodwill and provide you, the CDR, with PPE for whatever needs that you have. I contacted the state of Arkansas and said, hey, we're going to be receiving a fairly significant shipment of thousands of surgical masks from the Chuzhou municipal government. We'd like to know if there's a need for those here in Arkansas. Well, there obviously was. PPE was in short supply at the time.
Jimmy Doolittle was awarded America's highest military decoration, the Congressional Medal of Honor. All of the Raiders received the Distinguished Flying Cross. David Thatcher was awarded the Silver Star. Still, time would do what enemy anti-aircraft fire and fighter planes couldn't. It has taken the lives of all the Raiders and removed their story from public memory. Today, most Americans don't know who the Doolittle Raiders were, what they did, or why it was important.
When I left on that trip to China, I was sitting at O'Hare Airport, waiting to get on the plane, and was talking to other people who were traveling to China too, asking them why they were going there. And they were going there just to tour and go around or go through China to someplace else. And I asked them if they knew about the Doolittle Tokyo Raid, and nobody knows anything about the Doolittle Tokyo Raid. And they were my age, which, so when I explained them about the raid, I thought, well, I'm passing on history here.
Restoring that memory is the mission of the children and grandchildren of the Raiders. Professor Lu Shiping and his volunteers are working to preserve these memories too.
铭记历史，缅怀英雄。杜立特突袭行动的飞行员是传奇英雄，为营救美国飞行员而做出重大牺牲的中国浙江和江西人民也是英雄。突袭者的突袭行动是伟大的传奇故事，但他们在中国的经历更是突袭行动中最精彩的传奇篇章。我们要永远铭记这段历史，永远缅怀创造这段历史的伟大英雄。
The Doolittle raid shaped not just history, but the raiders, their rescuers, and their families as well.
Before that, he was a happy-go-lucky second lieutenant. You know, they were just having fun and being in the military, and they got to fly an airplane all the time, and they didn't really do anything. And then literally right off the bat, in the very, very first weeks of the war, he becomes a human. He becomes a brave, courageous human being. It shaped him. It made him who he was, because from that moment on, he was no longer a kid.
I get emotional because I don't think I realized how much drama there was when I actually was small, was a child. Had I realized it even 10 years earlier, I could have talked with my father a lot more about it. You know, it's sort of a bittersweet feeling to have all that history having happened to someone so close to me, but I didn't really take full advantage of it at the time.
The China which exists today is totally unlike the China the Doolittle raiders experienced. Yet this new China can trace its roots back to events that occurred decades ago in the small towns and tiny villages of rural China.
So I wanted to go there to say a thank you from my family to those people. And when I left China in 2018, I announced that I came over with 4 nationalities, Polish, Czechoslovakian, French, and Irish, but I was going home with 5 because I added China to one of my nationalities.
It is probably safe to assume that the United States and the People's Republic of China will continue to disagree on virtually everything. But one thing the American people and the Chinese people agree on is the heroism of the Doolittle raiders and the courage of their Chinese rescuers.
No matter how different the backgrounds, the cultures, the ethnic identities, the nationalities, the governments, that there's still ways for human beings to relate to each other and to help each other survive. I think that's the legacy.